Okay, Zoom went away on me, so there we go. Okay, thank you for that. So as I was introduced, I'm Lauren Summers. I'm a speech and language pathologist. I have a very unique career. So I'm just going to kind of walk you through that today. So just briefly about me, I am from Bayfield, but I currently reside in Seaforth. I've obtained my bachelor's in speech and language sciences from Brock, as well as a master's in speech language pathology at McMaster. And I currently work as a speech language pathologist with two companies or organizations. So SpeechWorks is my employer. It's a private practice based in Burlington. But we are contracted by Sioux Lookout First Nations Health Authority, or SLFNA, to provide SLP services for both pediatric and adult clients in remote regions of Northwestern Ontario. So briefly, to describe the role of an SLP, we are allied healthcare professionals in the rehabilitation field that work with people of all ages to assess, treat, and diagnose many different types of communication and swallowing disorders. So if it has anything to do with their ability to eat and swallow food, or to be able to communicate, whether that's to understand what people are saying or to be able to express themselves, our role is there. That's where we kind of come in. So some of the areas might include speech sounds. So whether that's someone who has difficulty with articulation, it could be a kid who's struggling to say their L's and R's or their S's, like what most people think of us as. Or it could be someone who has ALS and is struggling with dysarthria and slurred speech. So we can work with patients and clients with those disorders, along with language-based disorders. So whether that's acquired from a stroke and they end up with aphasia or the loss of language, or developmentally, they might be behind their peers when it comes to their receptive and expressive language, their ability to understand and be understood. As well as social communication. So the effects that their ability to understand some of those higher level communication skills like jokes and sarcasm and being able to know what's appropriate, what's inappropriate, or what I like to say is expected or unexpected communication behaviors. We also work with voice, so whether that's people who have lost their voice, people with vocal nodes, people who have resonance issues, so airflow is coming out their nose versus their mouth, which can distort how their voice sounds. We work with kids and adults with fluency or stuttering disorders, as well as children with literacy impairments, because written language is still language. It's still a form of communication, so that's why literacy is within our scope. Oral rehabilitation, so people who may lose their hearing or have never had their hearing, being able to navigate that and being able to be effective communicators in any way that they can be, or if they've received their cochlear implants or hearing aids, we help them be able to make sense of the sounds that they're now experiencing for the first time. And then there's alternative and augmentative communication. So those are like communication devices. People may not be able to speak using their voice. And so these are assistive devices that they can use to be able to communicate for them. And then there's cognitive communication, which if someone has an acquired brain injury, most notably a traumatic brain injury, it might affect their ability to organize their thoughts, their executive functioning might be impaired, memory might be impaired, and communication might be impaired. So we help with those sort of cognitive skills, along with feeding and swallowing. So both for pediatrics and adults. I've worked with infants as young as 6 months of age and adults as old as 99. So there's a huge range there. And other areas such as accent modification, that's just a volunteer service. We don't think that accents are needed to be corrected, but some people do come to us to assist with being able to modify their accent so that they are better understood by other people who may not be familiar with their accent. Along with working in the legal sector, I'm a communication intermediary. So oftentimes I will work with the court system to provide an easier way for people who are either defendants be able to understand what it is that the lawyers are communicating to them in an effective way. So lots of things that we can work with. And then these are just some examples, just so you can visualize it. So this is what I mean by assisted devices. It could be someone with ALS who has lost their motor function, lost their ability to speak, and now requires a system using eye gaze to be able to communicate. Or it could just be something as simple as a cord board where a child might be able to point to certain pictures or build certain sentences to help get their messages across. We can run things like aphasia groups. So for older adults or even young adults who have had a stroke and have aphasia, we run these social groups to allow them to be able to practice their skills and their strategies and to strengthen those connections in the brain to kind of get some of that language back. And then we also work uniquely with gender affirming voice as well. So helping people with that gender dysphoria that they feel, be able to produce a voice that best matches their gender. And we work in a variety of settings as well. So these are some of the most common, whether that's schools, long-term care facilities, private practice, hospitals, in both acute, NICU, or long-term departments. But we also work out in the community as well. More specifically, I work in the First Nations communities, and I'm kind of an everything SLP. So I'm required to go into the schools and provide school service, but I'm also required to go to the nursing station and provide service there, or I might go to the homes and provide home care service, or I might have them come to a healthcare community building separate from the ones that I've just mentioned to receive service. So we just kind of make do with what we can and do the best that we can with the resources that we have. So I just wanted to walk you through a day in a life of what it looks like for me when I work in the remote First Nations communities. So I work specifically in 6 communities, but I help coordinate services, speech services, for 33 communities in Northwestern Ontario, including Sioux Lookout. But the 6 communities that I oversee for SLP services on a consistent basis are Weagamau or North Caribou Lake First Nation, Webequie First Nation, it's a long name, Kitchinamekiseb and Innuit, or KI for short, and Sachiko Lake, Cat Lake, and Bearskin Lake. And I've highlighted them here on the map. So you can see they're pretty far north, in the middle of forests and lakes. And then this is just a picture of what that looks like. So I've labeled them here to give you a sense that all communities have some things in common, but they're all different. So they're all nestled next to a large lake that provides support for things like their winter roads. When it freezes over, it allows them road access to and from other communities. Fishing, it allows them just an access to trade. Originally, it had something to do with trade, the government. So they put these settlements, these reservations close to the water so they could access them effectively for things like trade. And yeah, they're very small, very close-knit communities. They're not in large areas whatsoever. Webequie is on a small little island. I can walk from one end to the other in less than 30 minutes. So very close and tight-knit. So as I mentioned, I work in schools, I work in the nursing stations, homes, community healthcare buildings. I train community members to carry out SLP therapy techniques. I build relationships and trust with people. I take part in cultural activities, collaborate with members in the community as well as other clinicians. And I do so much more that I just can't put into words today. So for example, you'll see here that we take these really small planes The communities I travel to are only accessible by plane, except for in the winter, they are accessible by road through the winter roads. I've been on them, they're really scary, but safe for the most part. So we take these really small planes to the communities. We take part in events like here I am frying some French fries for the Education Authority's end of year celebration. I take part in traditional activities like learning how to prepare hide for various uses like making drums or rattles. I go into the schools. I take part in things like Orange Shirt Day or Truth and Reconciliation Day with the whole community. I take part in sweat lodge ceremonies, which are interesting. Sometimes I'll spend my evenings supporting the clients on my caseload and kids in general at their local arenas to watch them play hockey or broomball or anything like that. And when the season is right, I also go out and do what I can to pick some blueberries. Best blueberries I've ever had. We'll never experience anything like that in your local grocery stores. So some of the benefits of my role, it provides an opportunity for continuous learning and growth. Each community is different and unique, and it allows me to build unique connections and opportunities to integrate myself with the community and the events. I get to speak with a lot of the community members and elders to hear their stories and to learn more about their community. And I've spent many hours speaking to parents and grandparents about their perspectives, which greatly informs my practice. So a never-ending learning journey. It also allows me an opportunity to spread awareness and destigmatize First Nations populations, and to kind of let them know what it's like to live and work on a reserve, opening up to new perspectives and decreasing some of those stereotypes that we might have around Indigenous populations in Canada. It allows me to own in on my flexibility skills. It provides a supportive environment. The work I do is very meaningful and impactful. I've got unlimited opportunities. It's always a sense of adventure, like going on helicopter rides, ice fishing, taking part in hunting activities. And yeah, I get to work with many, many fantastic clients, their families and coworkers. And it really does cater to my ADHD brain because everything is always new. It's exciting, it's ever changing, and nothing is ever the same. So I really love that part about my job. But I can't speak about the benefits without talking about some of the issues. Quality of service is subpar. I only go in once a month for a full week, and it's not the intensity necessary to see true growth and change if you're working on one-on-one. The service isn't consistent. I try to make it as consistent as possible by offering virtual services, but unfortunately, not all communities can support virtual services. They may not have the internet infrastructure to be able to have those sorts of services. Infrastructure is lacking. They don't have the funding, they don't have the resources, the housing, things like that to kind of keep people in the community. So we're always having to travel in and out. There are high burnout rates with a high workload. It is what it is when you're only there once a month for a week. There's a lot that you have to try and do within that time frame, and then also outside of work. And unfortunately, there aren't as many incentives to try and stay in the area. I lived in Sioux Lookout, but unfortunately, due to family, I had to come back to Huron County. And yeah, it's really hard to kind of stay up there and live up there, housing shortages, things like that. And there are high caseloads to low SLP ratio. So I have a caseload, I'm one SLP for 150 kids per community that I travel to, and that's not including the adults. So it's really hard to do your job when you have so many people who require your services, and there aren't many of you to go around. And what's really frustrating is research conducted about 1 to 3 decades ago is still applicable today, in that there's a call for this altogether different approach. Things aren't working. There's frustrations with the system. And unfortunately, after having read the research, I still feel it, like it's still applicable today, but my team is working really hard to try and change that. Okay. And with that being said, I'll just wrap up the presentation there. But here's my contact information. If you do have any questions or want to know more about my role, I'm happy to share.